Good afternoon. How are you folks doing today? It's a little rainy out there. Let me see if I can make my book fit. Well, it's a great privilege to serve as Secretary of the Interior under President Trump. And I have acted or served as Secretary for a little more than a year now, and it's been a real privilege. And during that time, we've continued to assemble our team. And I think you'll hear later today from Margaret Everson, our Principal Deputy Director for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as part of a panel. Oh, there's Margaret right there. She's doing a phenomenal job. I begged her to come back to the department, and she eventually did. And so I've been very grateful for that. David Vella, I don't know if David's here. No, David's not. That's exactly the way it is at work. No, not really. But David is here. He's exercising the authority of the Director of the Park Service, and he's doing a fantastic job as well. I must say that I appreciate the introduction by Mary Ellen, and she's a pretty tremendous effort, a tremendous advocate on all your behalves. And from my perspective, you all had a pretty good year last year, given the enactment of the public lands bill, some very important legislation. And frankly, in Interior, we remain very optimistic that the United States Congress will proceed forward with some legislation addressing our significant infrastructure challenges that are often referred to as the so-called maintenance backlog. And should that legislation move, you all will play a very big role in our vision of implementing it. We also just included that, our version of an infrastructure backlog bill in our budget that went out today. We are also exploring ways to facilitate new agreements to fund core efforts on lands we manage, involving concessionaires, NPF, and other organizations. And Interior, maybe more than many agencies, has benefited from a great tradition of service and volunteerism. If you walk through the halls of Maine Interior, how many of you have spent time in Maine Interior? Well, that's quite a few. We have one of the greatest exhibits of public works administration art throughout the building, just on the murals. And really, I look at the remarkable legacy of the areas that I grew up in that were so heavily influenced by activities that took place during the CCC. And shockingly now, in 2019, I'm continually stunned by the number of facilities I go to, and they're still constructed by the CCC, and I think that says a lot about our infrastructure challenges. But on the upside, the reality is when I'm traveling on our properties, core members are everywhere in the parks and refuge system. For example, last June, I joined the Vice President in Yellowstone, where the members of the Montana Conservation Corps were working with us on some repair of Old Faithful boardwalk. I've met folks from the Rocky Mountain Youth Corps in New Mexico, pretty much everywhere we go, Acadia. And it means a lot to me, particularly the youth. The reality is that when I was a teenager, I would have fit every single definition you all have for at-risk youth, like extremely high at-risk youth. So at risk that I ultimately left high school and I got a GED. And I profoundly understand that a minuscule gap can be the difference between becoming a productive citizen and not. And sometimes that gap is simply a single decision that one chooses or doesn't choose to take. And that's why I've been committed, despite our budget challenges, to make progress and work to build on your efforts from what we have. And, I heard a stunning statistic yesterday, and the Secretary of Education said it to a group, and I was so surprised by it that I had to go back. I saw her last night at a dinner, and I pulled her aside to say, "You couldn't have been right," and she was. 1 in 4 of the 8th graders in the United States are illiterate. Think about that a minute. What does that mean? What does that mean for all of us? It certainly means that a lot of folks have to find a different pathway. I believe fundamentally that you can find so much great solace by hard work outdoors. And seeing projects started and completed gives you a sense of accomplishment that really is second to none, and it can give you great purpose. So I deeply appreciate that you are vital partners, and that your work provides vital opportunities. I think over the last 3 years, we've done about $110 million in project work with you all, including, I think, at least 15 preservation projects. Our infrastructure needs at Interior often center on the national parks because they're a high visibility asset. I think we have about 43,000 buildings, and very few of them are new. There were a few times of construction in Interior. There were the 30s. There were the Mission 66 projects in the 60s. And, frankly, if you go look at our properties, most of them look like it, right? We had an entire period of Quonset huts as our primary building of choice. And then we have some wonderful visitor centers. Glacier National Parks Visitor Center was a $22 million project, but it was largely paid for by philanthropy. And as we look at our aging facilities, growing visitation, and limited resources, I really believe that we need an infrastructure maintenance backlog program. We also have to do more with philanthropic endeavors for high-profile assets, and frankly, we can talk about a couple of those today. And then I also think we have to be sensible about our fee structure and modifying it, because when I come into the Department of the Interior today, my budget picture is actually worse than it was when I was here in 2001 to 2008. And it was worse when I walked in the door in 2017. And that's not a dig on anyone. It's just a simple reality that Congress likes to fund construction. Congress loves to fund grants. Congress doesn't quite love as much operations. And at the Department of the Interior, we do a lot of operations. Construction's nice for new shining things, but the reality is, we need to take care of what we have, and we need to have flexibility in our operations. One of the things I did last year was authorize the Park Service to begin hiring permanent employees and utilizing recreation fees for that. They had a policy in place when the rec fee demo program was established that they didn't want to do that. But the reality was, if they didn't do that, visitors were going to continue to have not great experiences, and our personnel needs were not going to be addressed. And so I basically went to some superintendents and said, you want to do this? I think you should. Just know, if rec fees go away, we got to deal with that. But we're at a point now where recreation fees are about $300 million a year at the Park Service. There's no way they're going away because the appropriators can't fill the bucket. So, at one time, a new program like that has risk, but 10 years later, the risk is minimal, and we need to adopt our thinking to that. And I really do believe the future is a degree of philanthropic endeavors, more creative rec fees, and whatever Congress gives us. It's not a belief that Congress is going to fund everything. I think that's a false hope. So, anyways, I have asked for some project ideas from my chief recreationist, Rick May, and over the next 60 days, he will be looking for a series of projects that we can invest in and work with you. And so I'd like you all to work to come up with that list with him. And, I really want to build on the relationship we have, invest a little more in it, and keep moving about at a healthy pace.